So welcome to this early stage therapeutic investors panel. Before we get started, I think what would be interesting, since we have a rather small audience, to understand who is in the room. So if all the guys that are investors could raise their hand real quickly. So we have two, three, and the others are entrepreneurs. Okay, great. So we have around half and half, which should be fine. What this panel would be like, what we're trying to give you as a takeaway is, how can you work with early stage therapeutic investors like us? How do we make decisions? How can you get in touch with us? What are kind of the do's and don'ts when it comes to fundraising? And maybe give you a bit of insight and tell you some war stories of recent fundraisings we've done. We'd start with a quick introduction round, then move over to how our investment process looks like, and afterwards give you a bit of insight on fundraising in general. So, Marco, do you want to give it a head start and introduce yourself and the firm?
Sure. So I'm Marco. I'm with Forbion, based in the Netherlands. We have also an office in Munich, Germany, representation in the US, and actually since recent also partner in Singapore. So we're looking into the Asian market as well. My own background is in science, and I'm about 12-13 years at Forbion. So I've probably by now hundreds or maybe even thousands of opportunities I've seen over the years. I think important for this panel is also that Forbion has a joint venture with an earlier stage investor called Biogeneration Ventures, or BGV. So if it's too early for Forbion, we discuss and refer to Biogeneration to pick it up if it's interesting. So leave it with it.
Okay, I'm Martin. I'm with the High-Tech Gründerfonds. High-Tech Gründerfonds is one of the largest early-stage seed funds in Europe. We invest currently out of our third fund. Each fund is about 300 million euro. And we do invest in seed stage, early stage companies only up to 3 years of age. They should do something in Germany, but don't have to be in Germany. So most of our companies we have invested in so far, over 500 over the last 12 years, are based in Germany. Active portfolio is about 250 companies. About 1/3 of this is in life sciences. I'm with the life science team. I'm an immunologist by training, and have a portfolio of mixed biotech and medtech companies. And maybe I explain more about our fund and how we work later.
Okay, good morning. My name is Roel. I'm a managing director at Incaf Capital, based in Amsterdam. Personal background, first part of that I usually describe as failed scientist, recovering investment banker. Very much failed scientist, not enough patience. And since then I've been running a BD group in pharma, and for the last 10 years I've been sort of building and running a corporate venture fund at German Merck until I joined Incaf Capital 1st of Jan of this year. Incaf is a 500 million euro fund, invests in healthcare and in tech, and in between tech and healthcare in technology-enabled healthcare. We are early stage investors, like to get in seed, Series A, like to lead or co-lead our deals, and aim to be the largest or one of the largest holders of a stock by the time we see liquidity. We're set up to work with entrepreneurs that have the vision to build companies long term. One of the key differences of our fund structures vis-a-vis some of the others is that we have a 20-year fund cycle. We look at our investments on the basis of an expected 15 to 30 million investment over the life cycle of a company, but can go beyond that and have a cap at 70 million per company, in order to put us in a position where we see that entrepreneurs, that founder teams can validate their initial thesis and validate their platform so that we can accelerate the development of that company. Invest in Europe, based out of Amsterdam. The emphasis is obviously on the Netherlands and the areas around us, but have the flexibility to go beyond that. And I think that's high level what we do.
Awesome, great. So hi guys, my name is Harvey. I'm a partner at Apollo Ventures. We invest in Europe and the US from incorporation stage, so we have an in-house company builder, up to Series A stage. Typical check sizes are between 1 to 10 million. And we like to be really operationally active, and that's where my role comes in as well. I have a financial and entrepreneurial background, so worked at an investment bank in M&A, and started 3 companies myself. And that's where I get in and partner up with the professors and scientists that are great on the scientific side of things, but sometimes lack a bit of the operational experience on how to build a company from an academic spin-out to moving it up and preparing it for clinical trials.
Only sometimes?
It really depends on the founder, and I think we're going to get to that later, like when it comes to team building and what the investment criteria are. But yeah, so that's what we're doing. Our focus is on we solely invest in therapeutics, and on the other hand side, we also have an anti-aging focus. So all of our investments have to have a preventative angle and tackle longevity, be related to geroscience, or try to solve multimorbidity. Awesome. So thanks for the introductions. Let's say after this panel, one of the CEOs or co-founders of their respective companies would approach you guys. How does the respective process look like for you guys? Because I know we have a really interesting group of people here, from this 20-year fund cycle to the High-Tech Gründerfonds that does a lot of investments and would be really interested on how you can cope with the sheer mass of managing such a big portfolio. Over to Fabian and maybe Marco, because you just started. Could you give us a bit of an insight on what starting from the timeline to like when somebody would approach you right now, what would happen behind the scenes?
I'm not going to tell you all the secrets, of course. But generally speaking, so of course welcome to first of all have an introduction here, and then as most of the time it starts with sharing usually a pitch deck and an investment a slide deck ideally. So we do not need a 70-80 page business plan, because honestly speaking I'm not going to read all over that, but if you have something in a slide deck, that's much easier to handle. So we'll take it home. We'll have a team dedicated to the specific deal, usually 2 or 3 people, one of the senior partners and some junior analysts and principals. And we'll look into the data. So the deck should really contain some a solid data pack that we can really understand what the company is trying to do. It should contain an outlook, of course, on where the company wants to go. Well, all these things, and I'm sure we can get to the details later, but get together in a Q&A with the company usually if we think it's interesting, usually first by phone, then invite the company to present at Forbion, and if we still like it, try to get to term sheets and formal due diligence and strike a deal. This process can take a couple of months.
Okay, so from initial approach today until the money is wired over, we're talking about 3 months, 6 months?
Well, it can be extremely quick if you have an investor already and we tag along. I mean, then it's a matter of weeks, I guess. But if we need to start it and things need to change, and we wait for a little bit more data, it may take 6 months. But it's difficult to kind of. Well, I would say a couple of months is 2-3 months is not unreasonable, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So for us, we as well, we are 15 people on Lab Science group, about close to 70 now in our whole organization. A lot of controlling people and people in HR as well. So we go out to conferences and things like this. We take home or like to receive a pitch deck as well, not a huge one. We have one person assigned to the deal then, who takes care of the deal to investment and afterwards. We invite companies relatively quickly to our site in Bonn usually. We have also an office in Berlin now. But usually the teams come to Bonn. We take 2 to 3 hours there with you and want to understand the science behind it, because most of us are scientists in our team or have an idea about the topic that you're working on. After this session with us, we would like to also get to know the group who's doing it, the active people. Then we give out a term sheet first. This allows us to start the diligence then afterwards. And during the due diligence, we include one expert in the field on the very topic you're working on. And this is a process that takes between 2 to 6 months, depending on the stage. Since we invest in the first round usually up to 1 million, and if you talk about biotech or life science things, you would expect that we need a syndicate. And this is something where you should have an idea if you need more than 1 million, usually a syndicate, or how we can leverage with grants. And we have 5 standing dates per year for our committee, where we introduce the deals, and the decision is then made right away with this committee, within the committee at this day, and then we can either have the contracts next day or then start negotiating contracts.
And when you have these already set IC meetings, the contracts that you thereafter negotiate are rather standard, so the term sheets you hand out are kind of like you already have this blueprint that you fill the opportunities in, or?
It's usually not the term sheet that Marco would hand out, so it's a very general term sheet that we are interested. We like to invest either straight equity or convertible loan, and the terms are negotiated afterwards or during the process. It's not the end of the terms. It's not the end of the process. It's the beginning of the process with us.
Interesting.
I'm going to take it a little bit away from process, because I think that's fairly comparable between what most investors do. When you think about sort of what we do and how we make our investment decisions, so obviously there's a process, there's an analysis, and there's, as Martin just said, then there's a structure and a deal that is the beginning of something, and that's the beginning of a relationship. When we make an investment, that usually means that we're going to be in a relationship long term. In most therapeutics companies, we kind of have to expect that we're going to be in a relationship for at least 3 to 5 years and probably 10 years. That means that when you think about that approach, when you think about that initial process, I need to be, or someone on my team needs to be triggered by the excitement of the opportunity, needs to be captured by your belief, your vision in what you're going to do. And in order to do that, I need to relatively quickly understand what you're trying to do. So I think on the topic, and I think Harvey mentioned it earlier, sort of, can you do sort of a quick high-level couple of slides overview of what the company represents? In that 10 to 12 slides, I need to understand what's going to happen. Sort of, where can I be helpful as an investor? What are we going to build together? How can I support you? In many cases, when we have that conversation after this panel discussion, or when we get an initial business plan sent over, we find ourselves looking at a lot of data, and science is fundamental to our industry, but that data needs to translate into something. And I cannot sit there and be guessing what that data is going to translate into. I need to see instantly, within a few minutes, what that means. You may have found a new protein, a new target for a drug, you may have a new technology platform. How does that translate into a product, into a real opportunity? And how can we fund that and make it work? That's what I want to understand. The rest of the process, for me, is trivial. I want to see, and I want to understand, and I want to get excited about what you're doing. That, for me, is a trigger to spend more time on and do a process.
Awesome. I think that's a really great point that we can drill down a bit upon. So in your process, where do most of these startups fail? Is it actually defining this kind of like what's your problem solution product fit, or where do most companies drop out of the process?
So maybe to follow up on what I just said, I think we work in an industry where science is fundamental. So many of our founders have an academic background. That's where we've learned to do research. Academic research is based on having a hypothesis and testing that hypothesis. And very often our business plans are based on something that we call proof of concept, which is essentially testing a hypothesis. That is not a business. That is just testing an idea, and in most cases setting up an experiment to test what I think is going to happen, which is actually academically not completely sound. What I want to see is, can I translate that sort of piece of biology that I've discovered, can I translate that into something that's relevant for my patient? And relevant in such a way that the patient will take it, the doctor will prescribe it, and someone will pay for it. In many cases, that's very far away from the setting that you're currently working in, because you're probably doing experiments in the lab and you're not very close to patients. But you have to be able to go through that thinking process in order to define where your biology or where your new science is going, where it's going to take us. Because we invest in companies. Companies develop products and sell products, because otherwise there's no upside, no return for us. So that's the thinking step, and I think that in many cases that's what's challenging and missing. Now, there's not one shot on goal for that. We see many companies that come, we give them feedback. This is what you need to think about. This is maybe some data that you need to generate in order to optimize your thesis. And we can go through that story together. And in many cases, you do a deal after 2 or 3 iterations of those kind of discussions. But for us, that's a very important discussion to have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe in addition to a rule set, for us, I think it's important to know about the value inflection points. So how far do I get with the money I might raise in order to achieve something, and how much do I need afterwards? So especially as a seed fund, a very early stage fund, so we see companies, they say, okay, we need about 1.5, 2, 3 million, and then we have this mice data, or some early tox data, or something on pharmacokinetics, pharmacogenetics, but afterwards we need to raise 15 or 20 million, and it's maybe too early to raise it. So with the money you want to raise in this round, how far can you get, and is at the end a value inflection point where you can go to raise another round? Today it's rather easier than it has been before to raise larger rounds. So we have seen seed rounds of 30, 40, 50 million recently. So where you know that with this money you go up through phase 2. But in most cases, I think you have to go through ABC rounds and know the inflection points. And if you have no idea and just rather try to probe your idea, then that's not for an investor, because that's project work. You just have to work on this project, on this indication, on your business plan.
Well, maybe go back to your question that you raised on where do companies kind of fall out, let's say, or that we discontinue. I mean, a lot just simply has to do with, for example, fund stage, right? If we are in the early stages of our fund, it's easier to do investments. We have a 10 years fund cycle, not a 20 years, although some of our portfolio companies are in our portfolio for 20 years by now, so we can extend now and then. But as long as there is development and there is still value in the company, we certainly will keep on funding that company, because it's a waste just to let it go. But if we're later in the fund cycle, then usually we do not invest in companies that have a first value inflection point in 5-6 years, because it just doesn't really fit. I mean, we can refer to a new fund, or we can refer to Biogeneration Ventures in that case. But so there is a little bit of balance. Other things is really you need to make sure that you know your business, and if you see, as you may think, differently, but most VCs do have a good understanding of the business and of all the therapeutic areas, and maybe not, us individually, but certainly with all our advisors and network around it. I like to think that we do know a little bit about a lot of indication of. Just an example, we got a couple of companies developing something in post-MI, myocardial infarction, and that's just a graveyard of drug development. On the other hand, it's a huge unmet need. But so if you do not understand how you set up your clinical programs, how you do your regulatory work, what your target value proposition, if you want to call it that instead of a TPP, if you do not know that, I mean, that's for us, it's we can help now and then to shape, but if you do not know your own business, it's difficult for us to bring something to the finish line, which means in this case an investment.
One thing I would like to add, we have heard it earlier today, a no is not always a no. That's something I would like to really stress. So if we say, okay, it's interesting what you have, but we like to see consortia, this mice data, or come back and then work on your proposal, so that's really fine for us. If you come a second or third time, we're happy to have a second or third look. And I think this applies to all of us. So be brave to come back with more data or having worked on the project actually.
And after you guys have made an investment, what are the typical inflection points you take these companies to? So is there something, maybe if always you invest in a optimization stage, are you the ones that bring in the first IP attorneys? And you have a firm that you're working with, and to really build out a solid IP portfolio. Is this something I can maybe do before I approach you guys, or what are the key things that, if you look at your overall portfolio, where you add value?
One thing I'd like to start with is that knowing that we are in a very early stage seed phase, everyone says team is key, but we know that we start with teams that are not perfect, right? So it's scientists, it's postdocs, it's maybe a professor, someone from business, and what we do over time, that's we hire HR people in our fund, and we add people to this usually techie kind of team, scientist team. Someone from business development, or if you talk about more medtech things or digital health things where a product then is on the market, someone for sales, or we even, especially in biotech, together with other partners, we bring in CEOs then who have done it already, so who have developed a product in this indication or have partnered the deal already. So and then the CEO might become a CSO or a co-CEO. That's what we've done very often, and that's why we say, okay, team is key. We should have the feeling that they can do what they want to do or should do, but we know that we bring in other people as well. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Maybe I can add one thing on how we do it at Apollo. Actually, none of the investments so far, and also the in-house company creation projects, whether we teamed up with a professor or no matter what kind of scientist, he was the co-founder and had the idea, but he never ended up being the CEO after a year into our investment. So
that's well, that probably depends on who you speak to. But so what I want to mention here, because maybe just to balance it a bit, what is good, right? If you're even a first-time CEO, can be a star CEO. I mean, the CEO of Bluebird, I think it was his first one. We recruited. We were one of the founding investors in that company. But so he's doing great. So if it's good, it's good. But I think what Roel and Martin already mentioned is that a VC is not only there for the money, but is to also bring this network that we have of expertise, of opinion leaders, of IP firms if needed, but also if needed hands-on work. A colleague of mine is a clinician, so he sometimes even steps in as a CMO, but of course that is not our key business that is managing a fund and raising new funds and investing the money. But if needed, then certainly also at Forbion and by Generation, we certainly can take a hands-on approach just to help you out in certain steps of the development program.
And do you guys care? I'm sorry, did you?
No.
Okay. Do you guys care whether it's a virtual company or actually has an office? And if it's a virtual company, when should they de-virtualize?
My answer is no.
Okay.
No, you don't care.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
We are neither. So
Okay.
I think that's the decision you make that's informed by the asset that you're developing. Right? So we've had this whole trend in the venture community about asset-centric financing, which was all virtual companies, and then everyone stepped on that story and tried to do it as well. Before that, we had the platforms. I think the platforms are coming back. It really depends on the resources you need within the company to develop the asset that you have. If I'm a single product company, I may not need the same infrastructure as when I have a whole platform of bispecific antibodies, and I need my own discovery setup for that. So that's the decision that you make.
and it might change within the investment. So one of the companies of my portfolio in gene therapy were completely virtual, 4 people doing everything with partners and with a laboratory, where one of the founders came out in the US. And then we partnered one of the programs beginning of last year, and now with license money for the first time after 5 years, we started our own lab with this company in order just to do some very quick experiments for other programs rather than relying on academic partners. And I think this is a great development. We didn't have to do it, but with the money, non-diluting money for the founders from license deals, so I think we were able now to become less virtual, and that's a good thing, I think, to speed things up sometimes.
Okay, so and you already said like
Well, no, I
definitely not,
can't,
yeah.
you know, I can't disagree. I mean, this just
Yeah.
depends on the opportunity, on the assets, on whatever they develop. So it's both work well. And as Martin says, I think it can change over time, right? So if you first do your lab work and then you have a development candidate, and you know after that a lot can be done virtually, of course. Yeah.
Is there like a certain point when it doesn't make sense anymore to be a virtual company? Because we've seen that, so same holds true for us, also definitely doesn't matter, and in 90% of the cases it makes most sense to be a virtual company because the people you get that are really stellar, that want to step into these early stage therapeutic companies that have done drug development before and have gone through phase 1, 2, 3, it's rather hard to get them, for example, to move to, we have one portfolio company in the Netherlands as well, to move to Utrecht from San Francisco. So, but we're right now thinking about, okay, when is the right time for this?
But it depends on what you're building, right? So if I have a molecule that I'm developing and I'm convinced that based on some preclinical or maybe early clinical data, I'm going to sell that molecule to a pharma partner, what do I need a company for? If I want to build a company, and I think that really depends on sort of what do I have as a basis for that? Do I have IP? Do I have a platform? Do I have knowledge? Do I have people that can form the basis, that can form the substantial basis for building something that is real and relevant? So that goes beyond that single molecule. That goes to the point where you say, I now have a platform technology, I'm going to make bispecific antibodies, and in order to show that I can do that, I will have to take 2 or 3 molecules through preclinical and early clinical development, and then I make a decision about who I want to be. What do I want to be when I grow up? Do I want to be a company, or do I essentially just want to sell this off? Do I want to flip the asset? I think it's much more interesting as a founder, as an entrepreneur, to think about what I can create long term than how can I get an early exit, how can I get early liquidity.
Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, but then it's sometimes comes a point where it's not suitable for VCs anymore. So one of my biotech companies, they produce nanocellulose by bacteria, and now we have to grow our production site a couple of million, and then this money cannot come from VC. So bricks and stone is usually nothing that VCs invest in. So this has to come from other sources then. You have to consider this as well. Yeah.
Okay. Then shifting topic slightly, how can I as an entrepreneur most easily get in touch with you guys? Let's start with conferences like Resi, because there is a great conferencing tool out there, but I know from my own experience that sometimes it's a bit on the priority list quite low to check the emails that you receive, because I can't even handle my own inbox. So adding this additional inbox is a bit difficult. But what is the best way on how to get the most value out of these conferences? Or do you say, well, just listen to the talks of these 3 people that are standing in front of you, that's the best use of your time?
I mean, I would say come to the early stage investing panel and spend the rest of your conference outside in the along the coffee tables. Skip the rest of the program. Most of the value you get from these meetings is by seeing people, by shaking hands, by having a first conversation. And to your point, Ivy, I think for most of us, we have to skip the one-on-one system. Average VC spends 3 to 4 hours on email per day. Just incoming deal flow, deals that are in progress, and so on. The rest of the day I want to spend on my companies, on my investments. That's where I want to focus my time. So again, in order to go from a contact at one of these meetings, or an approach through LinkedIn, which happens a lot, or from a business plan that I could send to something that I'm going to spend my time and my resources on, is something needs to trigger me, something needs to interest me, something needs to capture my attention. You can do that very, very well in a 2 or 3 minute conversation at one of these conferences. It works well. It works a lot better than sitting in a one-on-one booth for half an hour, I can tell you that. Because in that half an hour, you're going to try to download all of your information about your company to my brain, which is not going to work because I'm not smart enough for that. I'm not going to be able to remember most of that. But if we have a 2 or 3 minute conversation, and I'm curious about what's behind your story, because you've told me your vision and you've convinced me that there's something there, that's when I think I may take some more time afterwards to read your business plan, take a call, and take the time to go through a presentation.
We do take one-on-ones in conferences, so that's what we do, and then taking notes and then hopefully receiving things afterwards. So being responsible and sending things that you mentioned you will send is, I think, important to, next to the story, to capture attention. And we go out quite often to research institutes, universities, tech transfer offices, and to most of the conferences where early stage seed companies are around, so for our deal flow that we call it. And also something that's, I think you should not underestimate, is that VCs talk to each other. So if something is too early for Marco, then we might pick it up. So and that's an important source as well. And so don't burn one source or one party, because then you might get referred if it's not a fit from indication or from stage between the VCs.
Yeah, maybe adding on to Roel and Martin, I think makes a lot of sense. So the one-on-ones we usually also reserve then for people we already know, just to catch up, to make sure that we meet up again. That is one. And most of our deal flow actually comes, that we've initially prioritized is via network, so people that we know, and we may know them via this conference, or via other VCs that refer them to us, because that immediately gives a kind of a stamp of at least an approval from another venture capital firm, which so those companies have gone through an initial process. That's very helpful, and it's just a mutual connection that helps to get it introduced at Forbion. So even our info@forbion.com, we always respond to anything we get in, and we do review. We put it in our system. We discuss it on our Monday morning deal flow meeting. So that is for sure. But it helps, of course, if you shake hands and you have a short chat.
If you look at percentages of the investments that you do that come, I mean, that's, I think, already quite a step up to compare to a lot of VC firms that, it lands at one analyst's deck and then, or desk, and he, maybe he goes through it, maybe he doesn't, but that you guys actually go through it. What is the percentage of investments that you do that comes through these cold approaches versus these warm intros where you have like you mentioned, a 2-minute chat where you're like, wow, okay, I get it, I want to dive into it, let me take some time?
I think it's really hard to see that because I don't think I would ever make an investment based on a completely cold approach. I may have an initial contact with someone and get to know someone at a conference and be captivated by the discussion and read something, take a call. But it's not going to be an investment based on just that conversation. It's going to be based on a relationship that you build up where you get to know each other, where you decide that you want to have me as your investor, where I decide that I want to invest in your company. Again, we're going to be in a 10-year relationship. Before we get married, I really want to know who my partner is. So that's always going to be the case. Now, there's obviously deals that we get referred to by other VCs. That's a little bit easier to recognize. But I think for all three of us at least, and tell me if I'm wrong, but in most cases we take the leads on deals and do that relatively early in the life of our companies. So the percentage of deals that are strictly based on referrals from other VCs as a co-investment, as a syndication partner, I don't think that this is the right group for that.
Okay.
Yeah, for US investments, we like to work with a US investor, as being a European VC, but I agree with everything in Europe. We'll try to take a lead or a co-lead. So, I agree with that.
For us, it's since we have this huge portfolio. If we invest outside of Germany, as we have done in France, Finland, Italy, or it's even in the US now, we need to and want to do this with a partner who knows this local or geographical environment, and from the legal perspective. So outside of Germany, we co-lead, but with partners there.
Maybe getting back to your question again, on the number of companies we invested in from the first one at a conference, that is close to zero, I'll tell you. So it's not, so also there it's kind of relationship building, get to know each, well, I guess I'm repeating rule now in this case, but so get to know each other, and sometimes it's too early, usually it's too early for our fund, maybe not for BGV, but for Forbion, and then we keep contact, and it may well be that in a half year from now or a year from now we still are interested. And of course then the seed is planted at a conference, but I guess we do not keep note of those things. But really, one that you meet here and 3 months later invested, I've never seen that. Yeah.
Maybe as an interesting side note, so there was also a Resi conference during JP Morgan week in San Francisco, beginning of the year, and I also didn't completely manage to go through the partnering tool, but one of the founders that I didn't end up meeting there, but he was convinced that his opportunity would be in scope for us, went through LinkedIn and scraped my email address and wrote me after JPM, or I think it was 2 weeks afterwards, where you're going through all the business cards you've collected, and he was like, "Hey Harvey, I watched your panel and I really think that we're a good fit for you. I would love to jump on a quick call," and we're actually now in diligence with them, and this is something that I would have missed if just because I didn't pay enough attention to the partnering tool, and there is a lot of stuff that you get which is completely out of scope, which I understand, right? I mean, probably do a shotgun approach as well if I would be you. It's just easier, and but definitely if you look up what INCAF is doing and you see you're right in scope, or look up what Martin is doing and he hasn't responded to you, I would follow up over LinkedIn or something and be persistent if you've really done the research and know that some of the portfolios are related to what you guys are doing, and would 100% encourage you to be the annoying guy that knocks on the door again until you get proper feedback.
That's true.
Up to a certain point.
Somebody that has been in the business longer than I have, yeah, okay. Then maybe different question. When should I start to fundraise, and what's the right time to go and attend these conferences and start looking for an investor?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. When do I start to fundraise? When do I start to partner? It's all these questions that I think the general way of how people handle that is sort of relatively late. When sort of people start to fundraise, they do that when they actually need the money quickly. When they start to partner, it's when they have the asset ready to partner. I think some of the things that you've heard from us, I think all four of us are saying the same thing. We like to build relationships, we like to learn about the asset, we like to give feedback, and that feedback can help you develop your business plan in such a way that it contains the data that we want to see for us to make an investment decision. It contains the thinking steps, the strategy that we need to validate our assets, the value inflection points that Martin mentioned, that sort of where does that come in along the way, how can we finance this company? For us, it's really valuable to get access to ideas, to conversations with founders early on, because we can do all those things together. It allows us to be in that position to learn about your idea, about your vision, and then contribute to it. And that often leads to investments that are based on the right relationship. So I don't think you can start too early with that. I think you need to obviously have your vision spelled out, you need to have the idea clearly in mind, but building that relationship and starting to get feedback, I think it's very valuable to do that early on.
Yeah, I just want to say that's absolutely true, and just want to mention that it's sometimes hard for tech people, scientists, engineers, to go out with an idea or a project that's not really done, where you could do more or polish it better, but go out early. That's exactly the point.
There's a colleague, one of our founders of Forbion, always mentioned. As a fund, we are always fundraising. So as a Forbion, we always, everything we do, actually, we need to think of, okay, we need a new fund in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So we should be aware of what we're doing, not only by building the portfolio, but also our relationships with LPs. And I think, you should look at it pretty much the same. So build those relationships, and when you're ready and when you need to go out, that you have everything established. So it's easy to reach out and go out and have a quick process. And in that time, before your actual fundraising, of course, you will also find out what VC fits your needs, or you have a good relationship with, or can comfortably work together with. So that also saves you, of course, time later on if you really need to get your money.
Awesome. Are there any questions from the audience?
I definitely have one.
Good.
I think, you're really transparent about under the circumstances you consider an investment. But something that is less transparency around is the terms and conditions for an investment. I met funds that you are expected to do all the clinical trials in a certain country and stuff like that. What would you say are your most awkward terms and conditions?
Very reasonable.
So why don't you go first?
Well, I might start, because our third fund is a private fund, but we still got most of the money from governmental sources. So this requires that money is spent in Germany. So even if you invest in the US or in France or Italy, there should be some legal activity or some activity in Germany where money is spent. So either you do your clinical trials there, some production scientists working there, or collaborating with one of the institutes there. So there has to be money spent in Germany, and not only because you want to be investable by us, but because it fits in your business plan. And then that's, if this doesn't work, yeah, it's awkward.
I had a discussion earlier today with someone who said that I'm looking for an investor. This is my idea. I'm at a point in my career where I want to be in control of my destiny, so I need to be able to keep majority ownership, and I want an investor, but I don't want them to have anything to say about my business. I don't know if you're pointing in the direction of these kind of things, but that's not going to happen when you get VCs on board. Right? So when you're an early stage therapeutics business, you raise capital, assume that you're giving up majority ownership. That's the first thing. Yeah? And with majority ownership, there are going to be a number of provisions in your shareholders' agreements that the way that now I'm going to be very transparent, the way that we normally explain it is that this protects our investment. This is because we want about a number of major decisions that you will be making over time about your business, we want to be in control. Yeah, so appointing a C-level executive, selling shares, taking a loan, changing your business plan substantially, firing a C-level executive, doing an IPO, all those things, they're all going to be defined as decisions that need to be supported by the majority of your shareholders. Beyond that, you have economic terms. I don't think I have to go through the structure of a term sheet that way. I think most of you know what that is. But I think that the thing that is the most challenging in sort of setting up the right shareholders agreements and therefore a continuation of your relationship between founder and investors is to find a balance between we expect to be in charge of certain decisions while you run the business and while you're incentivized to run the business, right? So while you feel that you're in control, while you make the majority of operational decisions, while you have the freedom to do that with the capital that we provide, in such a way that you and the people that are key to your operation are incentivized to do that. That's the way that we structure our deals. Yeah? There's nothing intransparent in those deals. It's all right in front of you when you do the deal. This is what we expect, and these are key decisions that can have a huge impact on our investment. And for most of us, in order to justify our investments to our investors, to our LPs, we have to set a number of limitations on that.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Maybe just following on the question, I mean, you talked about Germany, the fact you have some of the capital funding in the German government that puts a limitation or a constraint, let's say, on things that need to be done. What about Forbion and INCEF? What about you guys? It's in the Netherlands, but you mentioned you're open for investments that are not in the Netherlands. What's the deal there?
I can take this first. So we do Europe and North America, which obviously includes Canada and the US.
Sure.
But we can also invest in Asia, but we haven't done that. I mean, for now we still kind of need to build it up and get more expertise. So count Europe and North America. But most of our investments will go to Europe. We have the European Investment Fund as one of our major LPs.
Yeah.
They want us to reinvest a certain amount, a percentage of the fund in European Union companies. But of course you still have 30% or 40% to go to other countries. So that is one. And there is flexibility if you would be from any other country to set up a subsidiary or a holding or anything else in the EU to make it easier if so needed.
But it's you basically. For Forbion is European based. That's
No, and North America.
North America.
Yeah, Europe, North America. That's it.
In our case, it's one step smaller. So it's Europe, and our LP is a large Dutch pension fund, so with an emphasis on the Netherlands.
Thank you.
Awesome. Are there any further questions? Otherwise, we've run over 2 minutes, but I think that's hopefully okay. Great. Then thank you so much for these great panelists.